Well, hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining the call today. My name is Jake Lovell, and I am the CareMatters wholesaler at Nationwide. So I certainly appreciate the time in joining the call, and we thought it would be a good time to go through a new presentation that we have that we were able to go through today called Long-Term Care Planning in an Uncertain Market with CareMatters. So as we walk through a couple of the disclosures and I give everybody an opportunity to read through those, I always do like to just recap on, the CareMatters solution that we have and some of the key and distinct features that kind of separate us in the market and some things to consider. So obviously, as I'm sure all of you know, we are a cash indemnity solution. So we feel that's very important with the CareMatters product and giving individuals that choice, control, and flexibility at claim time to use those funds how they need to. Since we don't put any stipulations in our policy, we pay out the full monthly benefit each month regardless of what those long-term care expenses are unless instructed otherwise. And then we also allow for informal caregiving as long as it's appropriate for that particular claim. So in the event that an individual wants to utilize somebody, friend, family member, whoever it may be, they do not need to be a licensed person to provide that care, again, as long as it's appropriate for that particular claim. So a couple of things that we're going to walk through today with regards to the presentation is really looking at CareMatters and extended premium payments in a different conversation, in some ways that we will position a conversation in different ways with different individuals, but really looking at how extended premium payments can be a good option to consider, especially if you're in an uncertain market like we may be right now. So for purposes of today's call and today's agenda, what we're going to cover is the strengths of Nationwide, talk through that briefly, when and why planning for long-term care is so important, and kind of customizing that conversation depending on who we're talking with. And then, of course, with CareMatters, why all of the guarantees are so important, why they're so important in long-term care planning, and why they can be so important, especially in an uncertain market. And then how CareMatters extended premiums can be a good option to consider, again, in that uncertain or volatile market. And what we're really going to look at is a couple of case examples and case studies at the end where we're going to compare a single premium to a 10-pay premium schedule and some potential different outcomes, whether a long-term care claim never arises and it's just a death benefit scenario, or there's a potential LTC claim. So we really take pride at Nationwide in our mission and our strength, and in the fact that we exist to protect people, businesses, and futures with extraordinary care. And I also think it's very important to mention that we are a mutual company. We are a Fortune 100 mutual company. We really want to be here for the long run. So, when that claim does arise, then we're here to help and we're here to pay that claim out for those individuals. As we talk through the timing and the best time to purchase long-term care coverage and have that discussion with our clients, what are some of the good times to consider? Well, obviously, any time that a client is willing and able, but the younger the better for a couple reasons. One, from an insurability standpoint, so we can look at this a little bit better from an underwriting standpoint generally with younger individuals, and then from a premium standpoint, being able to keep those premiums a little bit lower for those younger individuals. I think it's important to have the discussion with our clients while they're still working. When we have clients that are still working, they can potentially have some of that extra residual income to help pay for those premiums. So I think it's good as they're still working and maybe not already in that retirement phase of life. But one that we hear a lot of, and I'm sure you all would probably agree, is, we get a lot of feedback around individuals that are dealing with different long-term care claims with friends and family members and parents and grandparents. And when you live through these types of experiences and you have a firsthand experience of the type of implications that a long-term care claim can really have on the individuals that surround that person, it's really important to make sure we're having that conversation with them and they see the implications of not having a plan in place. So make sure that we're able to have that conversation and potentially provide that protection for them. But then when guarantees are especially important to a client, possibly during an uncertain or a volatile market, and that's what we're really going to talk a lot about as we walk through today. So why long-term care coverage is so important? Certainly some reasons that we already know. We are essentially providing that dedicated stream of income or that dedicated funding for that individual in the event that they need some type of long-term care. And what we're doing by that is protecting their other sources of income to leave all of those intact so they can utilize those for their current living expenses, and those don't need to be impacted. Also, it's important to consider LTC coverage because we want to leave all of the assets intact for anybody who's going to be a surviving loved one, as well as protecting that legacy plan. I think it's so interesting that, we all go through these extensive amount of working years and we contribute towards our retirement plans and hopes to retire and retire comfortably one day. And at Nationwide, we take pride for helping individuals plan for and live in retirement. And we know that one thing to consider that can have a real negative impact on that retirement is a long-term care claim. So making sure that we have that plan in place, that clients are considering having that plan in place so they can protect that retirement and they can protect that legacy as well. Now, additionally, some other things that long-term care coverage is important around is protecting a portfolio in an uncertain market. So we're now able to provide a dedicated stream of guaranteed funds that are off to the side and they're not tied to the market. And I think that's why it's so important, because there's a couple of things that we all know that we cannot plan for from a timing perspective. We can't time market. We don't know what the market's going to do, and we can't time a long-term care claim. So making sure that we have that plan in place, it's that dedicated source of guaranteed funds that's off to the side, and it's ready for them when they need it, as long as they meet the claims qualifications, obviously. And it's there for them to help pay for their long-term care costs. Now, as we walk through the different types of conversations and tailoring different conversations to different individuals, there may be other things to walk through or to consider as we tailor these conversations from a middle class to the affluent to the high net worth. And we're going to walk through each of the three of these options. So as we have the conversation with somebody in that middle class, they may have real concern around now having to depend on friends or family members in the event that they need care. And we're going to talk about this, especially if it's in a down market or an uncertain market. And they may not have potentially thought they needed to or don't want to have to rely on depending on those people. But there are certain situations where if it's not planned for accordingly, they may not have no choice. Now, if we look at this from the affluent client, those individuals may think that they're a little bit more immune to a long-term care claim. They could potentially think that they're in better health and they're in better fitness. And, when you have individuals that are in better health and better fitness, they could actually be potentially more susceptible to a longer drawn out claim because of that, or they could plan to self-fund. And we're going to talk about some things to consider as we talk through self-funding. And one thing that I think is really important to have that discussion around the individuals that say that they plan to self-fund is, I'm sure there's a lot of individuals out there that can certainly do that, but maybe considering self-assuring with a linked benefit plan is something to consider compared to self-insuring. And when I say self-assuring with a linked benefit plan, it's creating that additional leverage on their premium dollars on day one, so they have immediate leverage, and then by creating that leverage, we have now put a stop loss in place for them, because the money that they have now leveraged above their premium is that additional stop loss for them to utilize for their long-term care claim if they need it. Now, if we look at this from a high net worth individual, they may also say that they plan to self-insure or self-fund. And again, we can now create that leverage day one, put that stop loss in place, and still have a death benefit associated with the policy. But what we're going to look at in a couple slides is from that high net worth individual, now they could have a problem, or this could interfere if they're looking to self-fund with estate planning and an efficiency standpoint from estate planning, and we're going to talk about that as we move through here. Now, as we have this discussion with our clients, we all know that statistics generally don't work or resonate with individuals because statistics can be turned against you. We can sit there and say there's a 70% chance that you're going to need some type of long-term care in your lifetime, and that individual can say that's fine, but I'm the 30% that doesn't, so they can be turned around or turned against you. And really, not focusing on those statistics, but looking at the consequences of not having a plan in place. What are the consequences to that individual that's on claim? And really, what are those consequences to the individuals that surround that person? Because if there's not a plan in place, then those individuals that surround that person are going to have to decide who's going to provide that care, what stream of income they're going to now utilize to pay for that care, if there is any. Is there a friend or a family member that's willing and able to help provide that care? So many different things to consider as far as the consequences go. And I think another thing that we're really trying to do is trying to change the perception of long-term care and really not looking at long-term care as a place and that you would go as opposed to an event in life. And when I talk about this a lot, instead of the word long-term care, I use extended care planning, because I think it's important in the terms that we use. If you think about extended care planning, we're going to plan for this just like we're going to plan for any other financial event in life, whether it's a wedding, whether it's college, whether it's retirement. We're going to look at this as putting a plan in place just like all of those other financial plans as well. And protecting that whole plan is so important to the whole picture of the plan. Now, as we walk through, I had mentioned we're going to take a look at a couple of different scenarios in these three categories, from the middle class, affluent, to the high net worth, and see what the consequences are going to be, what those financial consequences are going to be if we need long-term care funds in a down market. So, and this is going to lead into some of the case studies that we're going to look at here shortly. So if we look at someone in the middle class that is now in a down market and they have a long-term care claim, they may have little or no leeway to withdraw funds that they had originally anticipated were going to be there to pay for their long-term care. So they may be forced to, as I had mentioned earlier, depend more on either friends or family members than they had originally intended. And that's in the event that they have somebody around that's willing and able. Now, if we look at this from the affluent standpoint, they are not going to have some type of estate tax liability. But as I had mentioned, there's two things right now as part of this discussion that we really can't time. One's market timing and two's a long-term care claim. So if they need care in a down market, they're going to suffer a double loss now. They're going to suffer a loss from the market, and then now they have to withdraw those funds additionally to pay for their care, to where now they're suffering a double loss. Those funds that they had to pull out to pay for their care, they can't be left in there to grow back, and that could ultimately impact their choice of care or choice of services that they had originally anticipated when they envisioned what could happen if they have a long-term care claim. If we look at this from a high net worth standpoint, that's where we could potentially get into some estate tax liability. Now, again, just like the affluent, they're going to suffer that double loss as well because they said we can self-fund. We just now had a market downturn. We have a long-term care claim arise, and then we fall into that same double loss situation. But from a self-funding standpoint for the high net worth, the funds that are not used for long-term care that they set aside, now they could be subject to a potential of paying estate tax on those unused funds. And that's where, since we're an indemnity solution, they could consider using an ILET to help avoid some of those unnecessary estate taxes. And that's a whole other topic for a whole other call, but it is something that we're able to do. So how can CareMatters help? Well, CareMatters can help because we now have a non-correlated conservative asset in that portfolio that we have all sorts of guarantees in the policy. So we have guaranteed immediate leverage, as I had mentioned earlier, and we put that stop loss in place. All the premiums are guaranteed. As long as they're paid and paid on time, the long-term care benefits are guaranteed. We have that cash indemnity solution with no restrictions, and we have the 3 different liquidity return of premium options to choose from as well. So take a quick look here at a hypothetical example that we have on a 55-year-old female, couples non-tobacco with a 6-year benefit duration, no inflation in our maximum long-term care benefit. So what we're looking at with this example is just a 5-pay premium option of $20,000 a year, so $100,000 all in over those 5 years. And in the event that there's never a long-term care claim, we have that death benefit associated with the policy, so that death benefit of a little over $182,000. But looking at the real leverage on the policy for that long-term care benefit, over that full 6-year benefit, we now have created a little over $547,000 of cash indemnity LTC benefits. So we just took $100,000 and leveraged that into over $547,000 in this example, and we still have that residual death benefit associated with the policy that's going to pay out a minimum of a little over $36,000 for this example. Now, I do think it's very important to consider, especially right now with everything that's going on, the underwriting process and how the underwriting works for this. So this is a convenient and simplified underwriting process. So we don't need to be worried about going to see a doctor, and we don't need to be worried about having a paramed completed, since the underwriting process is completed as a phone interview. And this is something that can be done in the comfort of that client's own home. They do not have to worry about, any type of in-person interactions. So this is literally a process that can be completed start to finish without ever having to worry about seeing a person. So I think it's important, to think through and to consider right now with the way that all works. Now, as I had mentioned, we're going to walk through here in a couple of slides of a couple case studies. As we look at planning and funding strategies for the plan, we offer multiple premium payment options within the way we can structure the policy. So if somebody's looking to pay their premiums from income, maybe that they're going to consider looking at some type of multi-pay. We have that, 5-year premium, 10-year premium schedule, or even the pay to 65 and the pay to age 100. If they're going to look to pay from assets, then they could potentially consider that single pay or still consider that multi-pay premium that we had looked at. And what we can really do is that can help provide some extra stability towards a portfolio, especially if you're looking at this in some type of uncertain market, because we're creating now still, even though it's a multi-pay, creating that immediate leverage for their long-term care benefit. We still have a death benefit associated with the policy, as I had mentioned. And then the remaining assets that we leave in the account to potentially grow back over time is something to consider, and that's really what we're going to look at in these next case studies as we compare in a volatile market looking at some type of multi-pay to a single pay. So I had mentioned a couple of things, when we look at this, and we're going to look at a single pay compared to a 10 pay as we walk through, but really looking at these multi-pay premiums can help address some of those emotions and concerns as we look at these types of solutions in a volatile or an uncertain market, because, again, we're able to leave those assets in the account to help recover over time, and then providing that immediate death benefit protection, leverage, and guaranteed long-term care benefits. So what we're going to look at in these next couple of case examples are two hypothetical examples that are both going to be on a 55-year-old male, married, non-tobacco. We're showing CareMatters 2 6-year benefit duration with no inflation. And what we're going to look at is, this is all centering around an uncertain or a volatile market. So what's going to happen is this individual in this example is going to have a $1 million account value. However, the market has just had a downturn, and that individual is going to suffer a 20% loss. So obviously that account value immediately goes from $1 million to $800,000 when the policy is purchased. And what we're going to look at is now the market recovering over the next 30 years at a hypothetical 5% return. So the first example that we're going to look at is a death benefit only situation, so no long-term care claim. So let's look at what can happen here in that example that I just kind of outlined. We have a $1 million account value. We suffered a 20% loss, so we have $800,000 in the account. And over 30 years, we're going to look at that account recovering at a hypothetical 5% return with no additional deposits into that account. And what you'll look at and what you'll see is if you look at the single premium column compared to the $10,000 10-year premium column, the account value after CareMatters is purchased goes obviously from $800,000 immediately to $700,000 because of that $100,000 single premium. But if you look at the 10 pay, it only goes from $800,000 to $790,000. So even though the death benefit is a little bit less on the 10 pay, the account value at the end of year one is still more. We have a little over $830,000 compared to $735,000 because we were able to leave those additional funds in the account and then potentially recover and perform over time to help provide some extra stability in the long run to that. Now that was at year one. If you look at the death benefit plus the account value at the end of year one, there's a potential to be around $64,000 ahead on the 10 pay because of those situations that I just mentioned with being able to leave those funds in the account. Now, if you look at this 30 years later, that individual still is potentially at a hypothetical 5% return going to be around $65,000 ahead in the end because, again, those funds or extra funds were able to leave in that account and help restore that portfolio over the long haul. So that's a death benefit only scenario, no long-term care claim. Well, let's look next at what happens if there's a long-term care claim. So what we'll look at here is that same type of scenario, but a 6-year claim starting at age 80, that same market loss, so we still have an account value when the policy is purchased of $800,000, we're going to look at the market recovering over 25 years here. Since the claim is starting at age 80, we have that same 55-year-old male that I had mentioned earlier, and the claim is going to start at 80, and then the individual passes away at 86. So again, if we look at that account value at age 80 on the 10 pay compared to the single pay, we still have a larger account value of a little over $3.3 million compared to $3.1 million. Yes, your long-term care all-in pool is going to be a little bit less on the 10 pay than on the single pay for CareMatters 2 here. And yes, your guaranteed residual death benefit's a little less, but if you look at this over the 25-year horizon and a hypothetical 5% annual return, if they draw down their full long-term care pool, they can still potentially come out of upwards of $113,000 ahead on the 10 pay because, again, we were able to have that market recover over those 25 years at 5% while still providing that immediate leverage for their long-term care benefit as well as a death benefit and a residual death benefit. So, what we're really trying to do is look at this and have this conversation in some different ways as, we don't always have to just focus on a single premium, especially if it's in some type of uncertain market, and especially if we can leave some additional funds in that account to help grow or help recover potentially over a certain number of years. So, as we just kind of summarize and some things that we've talked about today is, CareMatters can really help bring some certainty to uncertain times since we're able to provide all of the guarantees that come along with the policy. We're able to create that immediate leverage day one on their long-term care benefit, put that stop loss in place. We have guaranteed premiums, guaranteed long-term care benefits, and that cash indemnity benefit as well. So, really looking at multi-pay funding can help keep more in the portfolio and keep that intact for recovery over a longer horizon while still being able to provide that immediate leverage for individuals as well. So I hope that helps a little bit and just looking at this in a different way and, helping tailor that discussion towards the different clients that we have. So I will turn it back over. I'm not sure if we had any questions, but I would be glad to help answer any questions that we may have.
We have one in the chat box, and it says, will you please clarify the waiver of premium provision? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have multiple premium payment options, as I had mentioned earlier. And the way CareMatters 2 works, and we have a single pay, 5 pay, 10 pay, and then a pay to age 65 and a pay to age 100. The pay to age 100 is the only premium payment option with any type of waiver of premium. So all of the other multi-pays, there is no waiver of premium. However, with the pay to 100, the way it works is we have separately identifiable premiums in our policy. If somebody goes on claim with a pay to age 100 option, all of their long-term care premiums are waived. Their life insurance premium, that component of the policy, is still due and always due. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Thanks, Jake. One of the folks has asked for a copy of the PowerPoint. Would you send that to me so that I can post that underneath the recording that I post later on? All right. Viewer 30 asks, Viewer 13 said, regarding waiver, thank you. Viewer 30 says, are the cognitive questions in the phone interview for older applicants?
Yeah, so as part of our underwriting process, we do have a cognitive assessment as part of the interview for individuals that are 60 and older.
Thank you. Viewer 33 asks, what impact are you seeing the stock market drop have on overall sales?
So I can't say that I've seen a huge impact specifically for what I've seen. I really haven't seen a huge impact, to be honest.
Okay. We have no other questions in the chat box. Oh, wait. Somebody says, what is the average underwriting time?
Yeah, so that's always an interesting question, just because that's always kind of a variable. That comes down to a variable that we don't control, since, really it depends on how quickly the client can schedule their phone interview and complete their phone interview. So that's the big variable for us. I mean, once we have an application in-house, it only takes us about a day to get it set up and a policy number assigned before we send out that initial email. And then it really comes to getting that interview set up and scheduled. Once that's scheduled, we usually have that turned around in about 3 days as far as our underwriting decision goes. And so really it's all dependent on that phone interview being scheduled and completed.
In what circumstances do you tend to get medical records?
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't say it's specific circumstances. A lot of the times that what we find, and this is outside of the California product because that's a little bit different, so that's not going to be really applicable for today's discussion. But what we have found is when we have requests for medical records, we generally only ask for them if we otherwise are going to decline the case and we feel there could be potentially a good chance for approval if we see that record, or otherwise we're just going to decline the case. So, we generally are not asking for medical records, again, unless it's a circumstance where we feel that we have a good opportunity if we see that to kind of get a better idea of what's going on, and then hopefully we can approve that case.
Thank you. And going back one more question to a different topic. Premiums can be increased based on market conditions, correct?
I'm not sure.
That's how the question is phrased. I think that they're asking if market conditions warrant it, premiums can be increased. Is that right?
I'm not sure I understand the exact question.
Christine, do you want to star 6 and speak up so that you can clarify for Jake?
Hi there. Thanks so much. Yes, I believe early in your PowerPoint you were saying that based on market, the stock market and so forth, premiums can change. Isn't that right? So if you're in a 10-pay program, can the insurance company come back and say, based on certain market conditions, we're going to need more premium from you? No? Did I misunderstand?
No, so the way our policy works is all of our premiums are guaranteed not to increase as long as they're paid and paid on time. Yeah, so no, we cannot increase premiums. Those are guaranteed.
Oh, that's great. And last quick question along those lines. On the very first slide, I believe you said there's no state guarantee. So even for the long-term care portion of your product, there's no state guarantee that stands behind the product on a state-by-state basis. Like in Washington State, every long-term care policy is backed up by a $500,000 state guarantee. In other states, it's $300,000 or $100,000. But on the very first slide, you said it looks like you're saying there are no state guarantees that stand behind the product. Is that correct?
I'm not as familiar with that. I don't think that was part of the slide. That's something that I would have to look into. So I can check on that, but I don't think it was part of today's discussion.
Well, the very first slide says it's not FDIC insured. Of course, we would know that's the case, but it goes on in that same segment in the disclosure. I think it was the very first slide, actually. But so I was just checking to see, because every other traditional long-term care insurance policy is backed up by a state guarantee in every single state, and it varies according to the state. So I was just asking.
Yeah, let me check on that for you. I have not had that question, but I'd be glad to check.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. Great presentation, by the way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that has questions? *6 if you've been muted. I guess there are no questions. You've done it all, Jake.
Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you all having me on for today's discussion and trying to look at some things in some different ways as we walk through these uncertain times. So, as always, let me know if there's anything that I can do to help, and I really appreciate everybody's time on the call.
Thank you so much for your expertise and your time there, Jake. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I hope everyone has a good and safe afternoon.
Thank you, Laura.